is an opinionated local sports editor who has made a name for himself thanks to his beard.
That's a serious beard you got going on. I mean, you're heading toward Doug Dynasty, but well-groomed. That's a good look. If I ever did that, that's the look I would go for.
The other guy is a guy who takes no prisoners when it comes to sports.
Let's stomp these dudes.
Together, they bring you the best in Oklahoma State sports talk and opinions on sports from around the country.
That's right. Listen up. Hey, listen up. You.
It's Jason Elmquist.
Today, I'm a mild-mannered reporter for the newspaper.
And Patrick Wheeler.
I'm a very dangerous man.
This is the Afternoon Sports Drive on the Triple Play Sports Radio Network.
That's what I'm talking about. Sport.
You ain't never heard nothing like this. Let me work. Show me where the mic is. I'm on stage, black shirt and my Timbs. You know how I do it. I ain't playing with you. I've been grinding. Anybody trying to sleep on me, better do something with your eyelids. I hear a lot of whining, but I don't hear a lot of rhyming. Whoa. Everybody got opinions. Let it go into my ear, then I block that. Put me on stage, I'ma rock that. Saying you the best. Stop that, phony. I am not that. Yeah. What are y'all doing out here? What are y'all doing out here? Maybe you should spend a little.
Who it is?
With the 10th pick in the 2017 NFL Draft, the Kansas City Chiefs select Patrick Mahomes, the second quarterback.
It is Patrick Mahomes the second, not Deshaun Watson. That was the apple of the Reed Dorsey eye in Kansas City. That's the quarterback of the future that they're putting the eggs in the Mahomes basket.
Yes, sir.
In the heartland for the Chiefs. The Honda War Room cam shows handshakes and celebration breaking out there in Kansas City, Missouri, where it'll still be obviously Alex Smith's gig in 2017.
Oh, man. Music to my ears. What about you, Jason?
Oh, it's amazing seeing some this week. The Chiefs have posted some of the comments made of like, oh yeah, he's a guy that won't make the move from college to NFL. He won't be successful and all of this other stuff. It's like, man, the hot takes that were so wrong, 3 years ago this week.
And I love that ending part there because they talk about still Alex Smith's job for this season, and I mean just looking back, it's like. Wow, anything can truly happen in the NFL draft, and you never know what gem you could stumble upon at any pick. And it's interesting. I love that right there where they go, oh, it's not Deshaun Watson. They're going with Patrick Mahomes instead. Yeah.
Well, and to think, again, this time 3 years ago, Alex Smith was a starting quarterback in the NFL, and the Chiefs hadn't won a Super Bowl in 50 years.
Wow.
So I mean, it's crazy to think that in the past 3 years, obviously the debilitating injury to Alex Smith when he got traded to Washington, and then what Mahomes did. Well, it's just crazy to think within 3 years how transcending a first round draft pick, especially if you hit the right one, can be for any franchise. And obviously for us, fortunately, it was for the Chiefs 3 years ago.
And I love that we can look back in hindsight now, but it is. Got to be, the feeling for the teams that ended up passing on someone like Mahomes. I mean, he gets picked number 10 overall. We know the story with Trubisky with the Bears and how that hasn't worked out. Deshaun Watson has been a great quarterback, but hasn't led the Texans to a championship or anything like that, and very well could have been too for the Chiefs in Mahomes' first few years. So, I mean, it's really unbelievable. Again, this is previewing the draft this evening of just you never know. And I love the reaction, especially when it's somebody that like for the Chiefs organization, they knew at that time when that was their pick. They had the idea of going after him pretty early. And whenever they did take that opportunity, there were people obviously that, like you said, were like, he's not going to make it in the NFL. Why didn't they get Deshaun Watson? Blah, blah, blah. And I love it because it translates into this draft with all the quarterbacks that are going to be taken tonight. You have to wonder, could one of them possibly be that next gem that you sneak out of the draft?
Yeah. And what was funny for me with that draft is earlier that fall when OSU faced Texas Tech, I didn't tweet anything out about Patrick Mahomes except for one thing. I said, I'm curious if NFL scouts view him as a NFL prospect or just another quote-unquote system quarterback.
Right.
Because that's always the stigma
that's always
guys
it.
Especially out of a place like Texas Tech or even go back further to Hawaii and stuff like that. Like it was it was more of a system quarterback type of thing. So I asked that question, and then obviously come April, my Chiefs select him, and I'm like, well, I guess we're gonna find out if my team actually thinks that he's a prospect.
You know,
I mean, yeah, because that was the thing. Is like I was always impressed with him in college, but again, I don't look at the intricacies that NFL scouts do of saying, he again, the people saying that, oh, he can't throw in the pocket and this, that, and the other. Is like, you know what? From watching him the past 2 years, that's not a bad thing.
He doesn't need to throw in the pocket. Yeah. I remember the game he played against Baker Mayfield in college. Yeah. That's the one that sticks out to me the most just because of how electric both sides were. I think you saw there some flashes of what could be. And then my earliest memories of Mahomes would be in the preseason 2017 when he's getting out there, he's getting some reps, he's getting some snaps, and I'm working at a news station at this time. I remember the game was on the big screen, turn it on, and this dude is just chucking bombs down the field like it's no big deal, and all of a sudden you're getting these looks and these talks like, what did the Chiefs do here? They might have stumbled upon something really great. And at that point you still had appreciation for Alex Smith just because of what he brought to the team. At the same time, you're like, man, if Mahomes gets a chance, and then obviously we saw at the very last game of the year that season, and then history followed after that. So again, it brings in.
To me, it's fascinating because you can probably pick multiple guys where you can see the things like this, the transition.
Oh yeah.
Of just getting out of the college system and getting, because that's the thing with a guy like Mahomes, you now look and say, especially the last half of this season for the Chiefs, it's like, man, imagine what Texas Tech could have done with him had they had some semblance of a defense instead of giving up 70 points a game.
And I love, too, that when players that know really how good they can be and or are, for instance, like Mahomes, like Aaron Rodgers comes to mind whenever he got drafted and said, look, they made mistakes by not drafting me earlier, and he's going to prove it, and he ultimately did. I love those guys because you can take so much away from who gets picked first, and how often does a first round or a first pick in the whole draft ever truly work out? It does not that often.
And that's my kind of question with Joe Burrow tonight. Obviously, he's expected to be the number 1 overall pick. And again, my concern though is, because you can argue sort of the pseudo system quarterback. Because remember, 2 years ago he wasn't anywhere near Heisman talk.
No, he got beat out by Chase Fields and
right. Well, a couple years ago. But I'm saying not this past season, but the year before, his first year at LSU, they didn't do anything great. It was once they shifted their offense to do something around him that he turned into this Heisman winner. If he goes to Cincinnati, which, I mean, after last year, I have no idea what offense they're running with a head coach that has no idea what he's doing in the NFL. Like, we talked about how a perfect marriage it was for Mahomes to get Andy Reid. That's my worry for a guy like Joe Burrow is he could be great, but with a head coach that may only have 1 or 2 more years left of it in the NFL before somebody cans him, I don't know what to expect with him. I think it's going to be tough for him because he doesn't have a veteran coach. They don't have some semblance of offense. Because again, you go back to 2 years ago, Joe Mixon was one of the best running backs in the NFL. Last year was awful because that offensive line was so bad.
And even then, there were games where he found production all on his own. That's the thing. That's Jason Elmquist. I'm Patrick Wheeler. This is the Afternoon Sports Drive. Sitting here talking about the NFL draft, when you look at Joe Burrow, who I'm saying, and a lot of people agree, 100% will be a Cincinnati Bengal, looks to be the case with the number 1 pick. And I've said it before that how much of his early talent could possibly be wasted in this system, which is kind of what you're talking about. If he's coming off the best season in college football history, statistical wise, okay, from a quarterback. I mean, we all saw it. Now he comes in, does he have what it takes to be an NFL quarterback? It surely looks like that, at least from the college standpoint. Can he translate it over? And do the Bengals waste this guy for however many years he ends up being there? Because we've talked about so many times how important it is, especially for quarterbacks early in their career. Those first few years can define the rest of your career.
Yeah, because we got to keep in mind, and again, I have no idea. I didn't put Burrow on my Heisman list, but that was for multiple reasons, stats that I looked at. But ultimately, if they think he's going to pan out, my worry for him is the last time you had a LSU quarterback go first overall pick, went to a franchise that was floundering and had no momentum going anywhere, and he turned into being arguably what people consider the biggest bust in NFL history in Jamarcus Russell. Like that's when I look at it, and I'm not saying that he will be. I'm just saying the cards look like if they're almost stacked against him because of the organization that's likely to pick him, unless he is one of those guys like a Tom Brady or Patrick Mahomes who can rise above it. But again, the two things that those players also had were amazing experienced head coaches.
Right, which doesn't have, and then on top of that, the Bengals offensive line is disastrous. Their running back, Joe Mixon, I think still has it, but again, if he had a solid offensive line, that would be something that he's going to be a back that's going to pair well with Joe Burrow too, because he's going to catch the ball out of the backfield more now.
Yeah, because think about over the past 30 years, some of the best quarterbacks to play football, whether it was Tom Brady, Peyton Manning, Brett Favre, Joe Montana, Dan Marino, what did they also all have? Great experienced head coaches. So that's my worry for Joe Burrow is he could be great, but if he doesn't have the right coach, an experienced coach that can elevate and who can mold him and take him to the great attributes that we saw last year, then I think he ends up being just another lost cause that we see. Because again, like Baker Mayfield, in my mind, Baker Mayfield, he might have been one of the best NFL quarterbacks over the past 5 or 10 years. But he also went to a really bad situation where he's already on his third head coach.
He went to a bad situation and also has not performed in a very lackluster team. But
again, I think it was because there was no good, experienced head coach to create a structure for him.
It was some of it, but I'm not going to give Baker Mayfield the opportunity to not put a lot of blame on himself the way he played.
I know. Okay, well, but that's what I'm saying is like when you heard the reports towards the end of last season where he said, "Oh, I'm not going to go work with a quarterbacks coach. I don't need to work on my footing or whatever." That's on him, but that's also on the franchise and the head coach of not saying, "Dude, you need to do this. You need to get better because you were a problem that we had in this this past year." That's part of the. It's kind of a. Both sides are partially to blame.
And here's what I hope doesn't happen to Joe Burrow, because I like watching him play. I hope he doesn't turn into a Matt Stafford situation, because Matt Stafford was a stud out of college and has been with a terrible team his entire career. And I think he's been one of the most underrated quarterbacks in the NFL because of that. Yeah. He's actually had good numbers and he's been fantastic a lot of times, but it doesn't matter because the Lions are so bad. It could be the same case for the Bengals.
No, that's true. Another terrible franchise that's never had a great head coach. Especially around here, people know for sure how much you can waste a universal talent in Detroit when people think about Barry Sanders.
Oh man.
So, that's my worry for him is if he were going again, if somewhere up there, and that's again part of the problem in my mind of the NFL is it's always there's always the same 5 or 6 teams up there, the top 10 with picks. The Redskins who have the number 2, the Bengals, the Browns, stuff like that. They are never able to actually properly utilize the talent that they're drafting, and it makes me wonder if it's not necessarily these guys aren't talented enough. It's just the fact that they got screwed over because they got put in awful franchises.
Yeah, and if you ask Joe Burrow, they already have. He's going to be completely honest immediately and say, you know what? Whichever team takes me, I'm just grateful for the opportunity. Yeah. In the back of his head, does he want to go to Cincinnati? Absolutely not. Would he choose to go to some other squad that actually had a chance of winning some games? Yeah, I think he definitely would.
I bet as much as it may not be fun. If I were Joe Burrow, I'd almost say, man, I would love to go play for New England now they don't have Tom Brady. I could join that lineage and whatnot. But it's like, you're kind of susceptible to that's why I almost kind of like the NBA draft a little bit better because of the whole lottery. Because then you don't necessarily always get the worst teams getting the first 5 picks. There's sometimes you get a fluke and someone who was a decent team gets is someone that could be a just an absolute difference maker because they get a top 3 pick.
That's why people have argued for a long time of the NFL draft. No, you're going to be the worst team in the league. Let's reward you with the number 1 pick. So that's been going on for a long time.
And again, that's the thing is a lot of those teams that are in the top 10 tonight have been in the top 10 for the past, some of them for the past 20 years almost.
Let me tell you this, because I'm not sure if you know this stat here. The Dolphins will have 14 picks in this draft alone. 14.
Yeah.
That
and
is,
they'll still finish with a 3 or 4 win season next year
and be the Patriots in the end of the season. Yeah. So talk about the draft happening this evening. It is draft day. Finally, the first, I guess, real sporting event that's coming back after all this coronavirus stuff. We're getting to see live coverage tonight. It'll be interesting to watch just how well this does work out, all taking place virtually, as we know. So that'll be interesting to see. I got to ask you first question regarding the draft here. And I think you've kind of answered it, but just to be for sure 100%, are the Bengals absolutely taking Joe Burrow at number 1?
Yeah, in my mind, with how much they need so much help, it'd be smarter for them to trade out if they could. Because again, I'm not 100% sold, honestly, on really most of these quarterbacks this year. So I don't know if I necessarily this would be, because this is one of those draft classes that reminds me of a couple years ago that people were like, man, these you've got franchise quarterbacks galore, and you're going to take 4 in the top 10, and then ultimately none of them end up, because again, honestly, if we really want to go back to it, especially with the team that gets the number 1 pick, this reminds me of when the Bengals drafted Akili Smith back in the late 90s.
Oh man,
like that's what this kind of draft reminds me of when it comes to the quarterbacks. Is like there's almost an overhype of them in my mind. So if I had the number 1 pick, I would actually try to trade out of it. But I'm also one of those people that I would rather trade and get multiple picks, because here's the thing is, that's the thing with the draft is the more picks you get, the more likelihood you have of more of them hitting than if you just have a couple and you have to basically bank on them all being perfect picks.
On paper, it does make sense to possibly trade out and get a bunch of picks, whether that be a bunch in the second round too, what have you, throughout the entire draft. But if you're the Cincinnati Bengals, I truly believe in Joe Burrow's talent. Now, last year, it was so much so that there was a time where you would actually could say with enough confidence, this dude is playing at an NFL level against college players, and it's not even fair. Now, yes, the LSU team was fantastic, but he was the engine that drove them all season long. I really believe that he will succeed in the NFL, and I also believe it's going to happen pretty quickly. Now, does it mean that the Bengals are going to immediately jump into a playoff contention team? No, they're still a bad franchise. The coaching isn't good. The offensive line isn't good. Their receivers are okay. It'll be interesting to see if A.J. Green sticks around. I'd have to think he would with Joe Burrow coming in. So, yeah, I'm with you that I do believe also Joe Burrow will 100% be that number 1 pick, and he is. And there's been a lot of speculation. The Bengals have basically come out and said, yeah, he's our guy. We got to look at these top picks here, because we have Cincinnati at 1, you have Washington at 2, the Lions at 3, New York Giants at 4, Miami 5, and then the Chargers 6. Those first 6 right there are what's going to be really interesting. I've heard from a lot of draft experts on their columns that there's going to be a lot of trading going on here, more than people speculate. There's going to be a lot of stuff going on in the first round that people might not realize. So that leads me to my question to you. With the number 3 pick and the Detroit Lions, do the Miami Dolphins trade up and go to number 3 and try to grab Tua at that spot? Because there has been speculation of that. Then the Dolphins had also said, well, look, we might trade up at 3, but we're going to go after an offensive tackle, to that of which I say BS. There's no way that they would take a tackle at number 3.
Here's my thing. Looking at the draft order right now with the Dolphins being at 5, if I'm them, I don't trade up.
I don't either.
Because, again, the Redskins aren't going to take a quarterback. The Lions, in my mind, aren't going to take a quarterback. And I don't think the Giants are either.
Look, they're not. And that's why I said the same thing earlier, was that you could be Miami at 5 and sit there, and Tua would still be available. There would be no reason to trade up to 3 when the Redskins or the Lions, for instance, aren't going to take quarterbacks. Now, if the Redskins were smart, do they actually look at taking a quarterback? Because is Dwayne Haskins the answer there? I don't think so. But how could they pass up Chase Young, too, at the same time? I don't know if you can match that to making a lot of sense. Let's put Chase Young on this side. Because, look, a defensive end isn't going to change your franchise. That's just the bottom line of it. He may help it, but he's definitely not going to change it. A quarterback has the ability to change your franchise around. Now,
and that's why if I'm the Dolphins, I don't trade up, because again, I think there's plenty of quarterback options and whatnot. And even like I mentioned, the teams in front of them, I don't think are taking quarterback, and so you don't trade up to go after a tackle, or a defensive tackle or something like that. Typically if you're in the top 5. you're trading up for either a quarterback or like a generational skill player, a Saquon Barkley or something like that. And there's nothing like that outside of perhaps a Joe Burrow. And again, I don't see the Bengals being willing to trade that number 1 overall pick.
No, the Bengals wouldn't trade number 1, but it would be, interesting to see. Do the Dolphins end up getting a burr up their butt and say, look, we for some reason feel like we have to move into number 3 to have a chance at Tua to be our guy? Which again, I don't believe that would necessarily be the case. I don't see Detroit being coming out of nowhere and saying, Matt Stafford era is over here. We're gonna get Tua. Now there has been rumors about that at some point. I just don't see them doing that.
Well, and here's another idea, because again, my worry with this draft class is maybe the quarterbacks aren't as good as everyone is they're hyping them up. So maybe if you're the Dolphins, you do take your top offensive lineman at number 5, skip out on a quarterback, and try for another tanking season, and then a guy like Trevor Lawrence is available next year for drafting.
Do you think they'd rather wait for Trevor Lawrence and possibly grab Tua?
They didn't do anything this past year to care worth putting a product out on the field, so why not another year?
I mean, the Dolphins.
Because here's the thing. Here's the thing with Tua. Because everyone keeps pointing out Tua, we also have to keep in mind he's coming off an injury, and while everyone says he's looked good, they haven't got the opportunity to see him firsthand. Have their physicians look at him and stuff like that. So that would, for me, if I'm a GM, that would be a draw of concern for me.
And that's why so many people are saying that you had the report at first. Well, his hip isn't fully healed yet. Who knows how he's going to be? Then you get his hip actually is fully healed, and it looks like his pro day seemed like he was okay. At least the video we saw of him looked like he was throwing the ball pretty well and was moving pretty well. Then you get more reports, well, we're just not really sure. But if you're the Dolphins, they could find a way to screw this up, but you have to pull the trigger on Tua at 5. He is going to be your next quarterback to turn things around in Miami. It's about time you start thinking that direction now. Does Miami have a ton of weapons, again, to complement Tua? No, Miami doesn't. But they're now in a division with a Tom Brady-less Patriots where they might think they actually have a chance to move up in that division. If that's the case, and if that's their mindset, then you need to take Tua while they have him. To me, it wouldn't make sense to wait another year and hope to get Trevor Lawrence. Because, again, weren't they trying to tank last year at some point, then they started winning?
Yeah, exactly. Well, yeah, because of Fitzmagic. That's their problem, is they relied on him to tank, and he's good enough for 4 wins a year. So, but no, and that's always the tough thing with being a top 5, having a top 5 draft pick, especially when you're needing the quote franchise quarterback. Because again, like we just talked about to start the show, you think the Bears are feeling good about trading up and going after Mitch Trubisky when 2 quarterbacks that went after him and are literally franchise quarterbacks already. That's why I understand, and ultimately that's why I think I would never make it, because I'm looking long term, and if I don't like a guy, I'm going to say, you know what, we don't need to necessarily risk it. But that's the thing, is if you don't draft him, Tua, and he goes to the next pick is the Chargers.
To LA, yeah.
And the Chargers take him, and suddenly he becomes right up there with your Deshaun Watson and Patrick Mahomes. Everyone's it's just like when because I'm too young to I was too young to remember it and whatnot. But when the fact of the matter is the Chiefs passed on Dan Marino.
Yeah, I mean, that's the beauty of the draft. I mean, you end up looking at these guys who you can see so much of, you can see what they've done, but it ultimately comes down to being willing to pull the trigger on a guy that may or may not work out. And that's why if you're the Dolphins, again, you kind of said it there, if they end up saying no to Tua, and let's say they grab Justin Herbert instead, let's say they like him more, and they go after Justin Herbert, and it turns out that Tua just goes off in LA, because LA is a place where they actually do have weapons. Okay, so that would make sense for a quarterback to go there and would be the final piece. Now, if that's the case, you look back, it's another Patrick Mahomes type situation where you go, look what we could have done. We were literally right there, had this opportunity. Now we're here at the bottom of the pile for the same number of years we've always been here.
Yeah. So I mean, and again, there's a lot of people being paid a lot of money to make these decisions, but there's also, like I mentioned just a bit ago, there's a reason that your top 10 picks, the 10 that are being drafted this year, most of them have been in the top 10 for the past 5 years. Cleveland, Jacksonville, Arizona, Carolina. The Chargers haven't necessarily, but Dolphins, Giants, Lions, Redskins, Bengals, all these franchises have been drafting top 10 for the past 5 years. And so maybe they need to change something up. That's my mindset.
Yeah, it very well could be. NFL draft taking place tonight, 7 o'clock Central Time. I believe there's actually like a bunch of coverage going on around 6 o'clock Central Time, but 7 o'clock is when the official draft will start. Just so happens to be, I think, one of the most exciting and anticipated drafts that will be taking place in such a strange way.
Before we take a break, what do you I didn't get to watch much of last year's, but do you like the opportunity of having multiple TV options because it's on ABC, ESPN, and NFL Network?
I do, because, and it's kind of funny because the points I've seen made about that are, well, you can, if you, other people that you may not like, here you don't have to necessarily watch them, because there's a ton of people that don't like ESPN. They're like, oh, I'll just switch over to NFL Network, or you move over to ABC where you kind of get more of the college football type vibe. So yeah, I like that 3 different options for a viewing pleasure, and especially right now, it makes sense to have 3 different networks showing the same thing, just in case one happens to mess up with everything else going on, because I hope this goes without a hitch, but you never know with everything that's going on in such an unprecedented way this year.
Oh, especially, did you see the little video that Roger Goodell sent out of how they're doing his presentation in his man cave? Yeah, anything can happen when you have that much technology in one tiny little space.
Oh, I'm telling you, the servers better be, better be strong. Don't forget #Boo the Commish. You can get your video put on there if you go on Twitter and put that hashtag in a video of you booing Roger Goodell. Bud Light will donate it's $1, right, for every one? Is that what it is?
Yep.
Up to $500,000.
Up to $500,000, yeah.
Which we anticipate will be taken care of pretty quickly.
I have to admit, because again, the Chiefs have never had the 32nd pick in the NFL draft. That if he goes up there and doesn't say you're defending Super Bowl champions, I'm definitely gonna have to do a video of me booing him.
You have to. If he doesn't, and that's just ignorant to not say that. Yeah. So there's going to be some boo the commissions coming from us if that doesn't happen. When we come back, we'll talk about who we think the Chiefs might end up taking with number 32, as well as the Chargers sitting in a very interesting spot. It's the NFL Draft Show here on the Afternoon Sports Drive. You can also call in with draft questions if you have them, 533-1051, 533-1020. We'll be right back at the Afternoon Sports Drive on the Triple Play Sports Radio Network.
Levitating off the blacktop. Used to struggle getting started, now I can't stop. Used to be the quiet kid in the sandbox, now it's hands up every time that your man rocks. They ought to stop me coming in again. You mad? You thought we were synonyms? Too bad, that's the water you're getting in. You're too fat for
it's the Afternoon Sports Drive on the Triple Play Sports Radio Network. It is draft day. I know tons of people are so excited to have some sports back in their life. I am one of them. It is about time. I guess I would fall into the category of those that are happy that the draft will happen on the day that they said it would. There was a lot of speculation. Would the NFL draft happen? When would it happen? GMs weren't happy about it. There were some that are probably still not that thrilled, but they got to do it. Thankfully for us, they do. Don't forget.
I was going to say, a lot of people are definitely excited about it. I know.
Oh, yeah.
Friend of the station, Sam Henderson, today's his 21st birthday, and I was like, man, I was like, how much does that suck? The fact that like you're 21st in the middle of college semester, and you're having to celebrate your 21st from back home in Muldrow, Oklahoma. Which, no disrespect to Muldrow, it's just it's not a college town. Let's just say that.
Well, and hey, the 21st.
Oh yeah, well, and his response was, I at least have the NFL draft tonight, so I'm good.
You can still have it with beer too now, so don't forget that.
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah, I never thought of that. I thought of people losing their birthdays, their celebrations to all this, but man, turn 21. That'd be the tough one, man. I mean, you could reschedule, but still, it's just that's a tough one to lose right there. So.
Oh yeah, I remember my 21st.
Oh yeah, who doesn't?
I went to a Royals game with friends. I remember the Cliff Notes version because I drank that much.
Enjoyed some brewskis.
Oh yeah, I mean we had fun, and it wasn't with my family, and obviously I was born on July 4th, so it wasn't in the middle of semester, so I'm used to I'm like I understand his whole plight of no one to no large group to go with during the college semester, but you could back when I turned 21 15 years ago, there was stuff you could still go do, and right now
back in those days, man, they were good days, weren't they?
back in my days, we could go to sporting events.
Oh, that doesn't sound right to say. Yeah, if you're one of those people, if you're listening, that's turning 21 during all this, I really feel for you. We'll pull one out for you tonight during the NFL draft.
Yeah, or again, if you were supposed to have a senior prom.
Yeah, all that too, man. Yeah, that's stuff you get to experience once in your life. So I definitely feel. We're doing a draft show right now on the Afternoon Sports Drive. If you got draft questions or anything's on your mind, call in 533-1051, 533-1020. Patrick Wheeler and Jason Elmquist. Tom Dorado will be here at the 4 o'clock hour to discuss other topics as well, because there actually is a lot of stuff going on in the sports world. We'll get into some more college football issues and whatnot then in that hour. Let's first look at the Kansas City Chiefs. I know that a lot of people around here too have interest in what the Chiefs are going to do. They sit at number 32 right now with their first pick. I remember you brought it up too, the rumor of they were going to go and get up early and try to get Ruggs, that receiver, but I think that's still far-fetched. And then again, you get a lot of people talking about, hey, at 32, there's some good running backs in this draft. Do they find a way to get a running back, possibly take the first running back in the draft at 32? I'll let you answer here in a minute. I would say to that, I don't see it happening, simply because we have to remember they still have Darwin Thompson on this team, who I truly believe they're going to develop. They added Washington, and then you've got Damian Wilson as your guy, Damian Williams as your guy. I have to think that those three, and then when they added Washington this offseason, I mean, it would not make sense really to go at. But you look at the running backs that would be available. DeAndre Swift, you've got Dobbins, Jonathan Taylor, Edwards-Helaire will be there too. Do the Chiefs make that move at 32nd pick and then go up and grab a running back that may otherwise be taken?
Here's my thinking when it comes to these mock drafts, when it comes to the Chiefs. They're missing out on one thing that has been a constant going back to 2017, and we know now how much input Veach had in that draft as well. They don't draft based off of necessity. They draft based on what they expect these athletes to be. Because again, in 2017, with Alex Smith, did they need Patrick Mahomes? Did they need a quarterback? No, not necessarily. But they felt he was the best option, so they went after him. Last year, they didn't need Mecole Hardman. I mean, even I understand at the time Tyreek Hill, there was a lot of off-field stuff, but you still had a lot of talent, as we saw this past year, on the roster. Did they need a wide receiver? No, but they felt that he was going to have the biggest impact on this team, so they went after him. So in my mind, the people that are because I've seen a lot of mock drafts saying that they're going after a running back. They're not going after a running back unless it's the right, basically it falls at the right position. If he's the best player on the board at this time in the draft type of thing. And so in my mind, if they're still at 32, I think they ultimately try to trade back, because again, I think they only have 5 picks this year. So maybe you trade out of that. And then if you still want a running back, they're still available 4 or 5 picks into the second round. But I think ultimately they're going to go, if they're still stuck at 32, that they go with, in my mind, they'll go with what is the best player on the board for them. And because that's the thing, looking at Mel Kiper right now, he has them drafting Jonathan Taylor. But in his big board, he has Jonathan Taylor as like the 36th best player. And the Chiefs, in my mind, are not going to be approaching things. They're not going out there saying, we have a need here, we're going to fill it.
Mel Kiper had them drafting Jonathan Taylor in his final mock draft at 32?
Today, yes, released today.
I'm kind of surprised by that. They looked at running backs. They think they would take Jonathan Taylor over DeAndre Swift. I think Swift would still be available at that point, from the way that it looks like.
Well, I believe in Kiper's mock draft, Swift was still available.
That's unbelievable, because DeAndre Swift, I mean, he's the number one back in that class right there. I think in that draft class, that would be something the Chiefs. And again, you look at a guy like him, Is he a little bit more talented probably than Darwin Thompson was? For sure, but they have a lot of the same ability. And it'd be interesting to see where they ended up putting him. Could they trade somebody out to get him in there? But yeah, at that spot, you would have to think they could probably still wait around in the second round and grab a running back if they needed to. Then I think they go after an offensive lineman or a cornerback here at 32.
I also, if you get lucky and one of the talented linebackers is still around, maybe you also pick up one of them, because linebacker was definitely an issue last year. So yeah, in my mind, when they talk about needs, to me, running back is at the bottom of the list of quote unquote team needs for the Chiefs. I mean, I think it's a case where I think they're comfortable with Darwin Thompson. Obviously, I think they love what Damian Williams did last year. You just signed DeAndre Washington. That I saw a stat came out this week. He actually led the NFL in running backs percentage on catches.
Oh, really? Yeah. Now, see, Edwards-Helaire, too, he caught 50 passes out of the backfield last year. Now, if you're going to get a running back on Kansas City, they have to be able to catch the ball out of the backfield, too. So, yeah, you can circle those two guys. They would be sitting at the 63rd pick in the second round there. So that would be their pick later on. So you've got quite a ways between your first and second pick. If you get on that first one, you grab an offensive lineman like Cesar Ruiz, for instance, or if you happen to grab a running back, then you go in and get a linebacker maybe round 2. But either way, when you're looking at 5 picks that the Chiefs have, do they grab a running back at all in this draft, even with those 5 picks? I mean, is that something that they even consider, especially if they get into the 63rd pick and Swift and Taylor and Dobbins and Edwards-Helaire are all gone?
If one of them are still there, I think they then take it. Because again, I think because what I learned last year, because last year I was of the ilk that they needed a cornerback, they needed offensive line help drastically, and they didn't even touch those until later rounds. They're going to go in with the mentality the Chiefs are of, we're going to take the best player available.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's a solid mentality, and it's something that's worked for them. Let's go to the phone lines real quick.
I was just going to say, that's why teams like the Patriots and stuff like that, teams that are always drafting in the last 10 picks, is they're not necessarily going off of need, they're going off of talent.
Right, successful teams do that. You're on the Afternoon Sports Drive. Go ahead.
Hey, great stuff, great conversation. I'm with you. I think DeAndre Swift is clearly the number one back.
Without a doubt.
Georgia does not recruit bad running backs. They put several in the NFL lately.
Yeah.
If you put him on that Chiefs offense, my gosh, I think you just go ahead and pencil him in. I know Lamar Jackson and Baltimore really looks good, but if you added a running back with that passing game, I don't know how anybody ever stopped.
See, and then that's why you bring up that point. Do they take Swift at that position at 32, grab him, throw him in that offense, and hope that they can find a linebacker that's in a cornerback that's good enough later in the draft to ultimately help out their defense? We have to remember how many players the Chiefs are ultimately returning here from a Super Bowl team. It's almost everybody. So maybe they can wiggle around there at 32 and go after a running back. It's definitely possible.
Well, in the NFL, in my view, if you can be, it's just like college. If you can be dominant on one side of the ball or the other, it gives you a chance to be elite. If you're good on both sides, you can be a playoff team and be 10 and 6 or 10 and 8. But if you're dominant on one side, and as dominant as they already are, if you had the best running back in the league, I think if I'm a defensive coordinator and playing them, I'm thinking, look, let's just look ahead because there's no way you're going to stop these people. Do you guys think, now there's some reports out there that there's lots of teams that's eager to trade down. Do you believe that?
Yeah, I think that's true.
I think so too. And I think a lot of it is because of the inability to get hands on with a lot of these players. So maybe they don't feel as comfortable with some guys. So maybe they're willing to trade out and almost get more opportunities to draft players. So if you miss on one, it doesn't hurt you as badly because you have more picks this year.
That there are teams that realize that they could end up possibly stockpiling picks, which in the long run, it's kind of like Jason said earlier, you could most likely have a better chance of hitting on one of those, and the more picks you have, the better chance you have of finding the right one.
Well, so the question would be, Do the Chiefs think that DeAndre Swift's worth the value at 32, like you said a while ago, as compared to waiting in the middle of the round or third round and getting someone else? So, in my view, if teams are willing to trade down in the first round, that tells me they think there's a lack of superstars in that top of that first round. Is that the way you look at it or not?
In a way, but here's the thing. I think that this is a honestly underlooked draft class in some ways, because there's people that are kind of underselling the talent I think that is here, and I'm talking on skill positions here. Quarterbacks, there are at least 3 or 4 solid NFL quarterbacks I think in this draft. Running backs, I think, is one of the most underrated positions right now, because there's 4 or 5 that could be solid NFL running backs. And then wide receivers, we already know there's a ton of them as well. So, I think especially at 32, if you're sitting there in your Kansas City and you go, it depends on how much you really believe in DeAndre Swift. If you think, because you look at the Chiefs, they ended up taking Kareem Hunt in the 3rd round, and he looked like he was going to be their franchise running back, right? He was the next Jamal Charles coming into Kansas City. If they see some of that in DeAndre Swift, do they take that risk at 32 and go after him and try to make a new Kareem Hunt situation out of this?
Yeah, I think you. I was just going to say, I think you bring up a good point, because I think perhaps another reason you're getting a lot of people trade down is because they understand how deep this draft class is. So there's more value to have more picks than just taking one really good player. You have an opportunity to get 2 or 3 really good players.
Yeah, and I would agree with that. It looks like there's going to be a run early on the quarterbacks. Then there's going to be a run on offensive tackles. Then there's going to start a run on wide receivers. So DeAndre Swift, who in some years, in my opinion, would be a top 15 pick with his size and speed, he may have followed the Chiefs at 32. And Andy Reid is such a great coach at evaluating talent. I'm a huge Chiefs fan. And I'd love to see DeAndre Swift in a Chiefs uniform. What do you think Dallas?
I was just real quick. I was going to throw out there the fact that, I mean, it's a case where in the big board for Mel Kiper, he has Swift as his 25th best prospect, but he actually doesn't have him being drafted in the first round at all. So I mean, it's a very possible that he could still be there.
Well, they poo-poo running backs anymore. I mean, because there's been so many good ones that's been drafted in the middle rounds. But to me, DeAndre Swift, Ezekiel Elliott was a top 5 pick. Ezekiel Elliott went way high. And you have to be a difference maker like that. Now, I may be wrong, but I think DeAndre Swift is a difference maker. Now the others, I'm not sure of. But Swift, in that Kansas City offense, of course, with the passing attack, they've got a lot of guys that look there, but he's a difference maker. What do you guys think Dallas is going to do? And I'm going to hang up and listen. Thanks, guys.
Thanks. Appreciate the call. Yeah, Dallas, go ahead, Jason, because I'm going to feed off what you say here on this one.
Well, I was just going to say I actually saw a report tweeted out this afternoon that apparently Jerry Jones has already told that his scouts that he doesn't want them calling and disrupting him during the draft.
Really?
I'm like, what? I'm like, are you serious? Don't you want input from your scouts when you're making these decisions?
Nah, he's Jerry Jones. He doesn't need anything.
Right? So, I mean, I bet you could look at every single draft pick, right, every single mock draft right now, and I bet every single one of them will ultimately be wrong with the Dallas Cowboys. Because when it comes to Jerry, he's going to do whatever he wants.
With Dallas, you're throwing a dart in the dark here. I would say that they have a better chance of grabbing that defensive lineman out of South Carolina. I think what was his name, Javon Kinlaw, or they could actually end up, because they're close enough around that 15. They're sitting at 17 right now. They're close enough. If Henry Ruggs happens to still be on the board, let's say Denver doesn't grab him, Atlanta doesn't grab him there, you have to take Henry Ruggs at 17 and pair him up with Amari Cooper. And, I mean, if you're going to end up signing Dak Prescott to a big deal, then that has to be your final offensive piece.
Yeah, that's a fair point, because obviously going back to what the caller, how he just worded it, you have to be dominant on one side of the ball, and we already know that they just dumped a bunch of their talent.
Yeah, we might have lost Jason there. See if he can connect back here. But yeah, that's 100%. If Henry Ruggs is sitting there with that pick at 17, there's no reason why the Dallas Cowboys should not take him, especially if they could add a second stud receiver. Henry Ruggs is a good receiver. I mean, he is fantastic. He could immediately transfer over into the NFL and have success, and I don't think it would take long. Dallas would be stupid not to take a chance on that. Now, if they end up going after a defensive lineman, you can say what you want about that. We don't blame them if those two are there. They have a better chance of getting Javon Kinlaw, maybe Clavon Chasen on that one as well. They grab that safety, Xavier McKinney, or A.J. Terrell will be around there too, safety and cornerbacks around that area. It'll be interesting to see too, because I've seen drafts that have that 17 to 20 mark. That's where they have Justin Herbert ultimately going. He'll go somewhere they think like Jacksonville, maybe even Las Vegas. Now, I don't know if I buy that at all. It would be surprising to me if the LA Chargers don't grab Justin Herbert or Tua in that 5 spot, or in that 6 spot, I guess is where they are. There would be no reason to not grab a quarterback if you're the Los Angeles Chargers, whoever's the best left on the board at that point. With the weapons they have in LA, they have to make that happen. We're going to take a break. When we come back, we'll discuss a little bit more about what we think ultimately will happen in the draft. Again, that's this evening. 6 o'clock, there's some early coverage, and then 7 o'clock is when the draft will officially start. And then Tom Dorado will join us at 4 o'clock. This is the Afternoon Sports Drive on the Triple Play Sports Radio Network. We're back after this.
The creek used to run clear across the tracks to Peabody King, and it all turned black. The diamonds we digging don't sparkle or shine, wasted away in a rich man's mind. West Virginia, Kentucky, go.
Afternoon Sports Drive on the Triple Play Sports Radio Network. Thursday afternoon, otherwise known as April 23rd, otherwise known as Draft Day. It's like a celebration around here. Everyone is pumped up for the NFL Draft. You know, it kind of makes me think, too, imagine how awesome it really, truly would have been had this taken place in Las Vegas like it was supposed to. All the glitz and the glamour and the players getting transported by boat onto the stage and just all the festivities that would have gone along with it. The traditional boos of Roger Goodell, the Raiders picking in their new hometown knowing they won't succeed no matter what they do. I mean, all of that would just be amazing to see, but it's going to be interesting to watch. I'm very excited, even if it happens, you know, the way that it's going to happen. It will be interesting. Jason, real quick here, we got to look. This is such an interesting spot for the Los Angeles Chargers because they know that now's the time. Last year, here's the thing. Last year, they were a lot better, I think, than what they played. And that's on both sides of the ball. I didn't think the defense was really that bad. They've still got some good players on the defensive side. They've got some good skill position players. Phillip Rivers is gone. Here's the problem. They can't fill up a stadium. They don't have a fan base. They're moving into a brand new stadium. Why would it not make sense at this point? You're sitting at number 6 in the draft. How are we going to sell jerseys? How are we going to get people's butts in the stands when that is obviously allowed at some point? We do that by getting a new quarterback. Because is Tyrod Taylor going to be the story that makes the Chargers great again? No, I don't believe that, especially in that division. When you are chasing the number 1 team in the NFL, you have to re-up at the quarterback position, and Tyrod Taylor is not the answer.
No, I completely agree. 100%. I think the Chargers are going quarterback because, like you mentioned a little earlier, and we had discussed, back last month when Tom Brady was officially leaving New England. LA is a really good spot when it comes to skilled players on that offense. You know, it was a case in my mind, and why I think it was idiotic for Indianapolis to go after Phillip Rivers. He's past his prime, and if anybody wants to argue me that, I will show you the last pass of the Chiefs game in Mexico where he woefully underthrew the ball, and one of the worst players on the Chiefs defense at the time got an interception in the end zone because it was woeful. It wasn't because he was in the right position. He had been burnt by Eckler.
Was that Orlando Scandrick?
It was woefully. No, it was. Oh my goodness! I guess the safety who plays linebacker all the time. If Chris Young's listening, he would remember. Oh my goodness! Why am I drawing the kid from BYU?
Oh, Dirty Dan Sorensen.
Yeah, Dan Sorensen.
Oh, you think he's one of the worst players? Is that what you said?
Up to that point, he was one of the worst players on that defense. And he was burnt. He was crispy. And it was so woefully underthrown that Dirty Dan just turned around and was able to catch it like it was a fly ball in center field.
I do remember that because, Phillip Rivers, and that was leading into, so for instance, last season, where Phillip Rivers was just constantly chucking the ball up with a lot of air under it, and it was just bad. So you realize at that point that, he was done. And the Chargers, they're the spot where if you're a quarterback in this draft board, you would be okay. You'd be heading to L.A. You have Keenan Allen, who is definitely a top 10 receiver in the league. You've got Austin Eckler, a solid running back. He proved that last year. He can get it done as a workhorse. You've got Hunter Henry, top 5 tight end. All on the same team, and Mike Williams on the other side. I mean, you can go on and on with offensive weapons, and then on the other side, you've got Bosa on the defensive end. I mean, it's really a place that I think a quarterback will be happy to land. Now, the question is going to be, will it be Tua or will it be Justin Herbert? I think it's going to be either one of those guys. If the Dolphins somehow manage to screw it up and not grab Tua, then obviously you would think LA would grab him.
And here's the other thing is, do they consider, because they only need basically to move up one spot ahead of Miami to have their choice of quarterback. Do you think that of all these teams wanting to move down, do you think LA is one of those teams who considers leapfrogging over Miami so they have their choice of quarterback?
Yes, possibly. Only if, though, they see a real difference in Tua and Justin Herbert. Because there's also a part of me that thinks LA is at this point where they say, well, first of all, we've got Tyrod Taylor. They seem, and this may be all speculation, this may be something that they just made up, but they're talking about, look, we like Tyrod Taylor. He could definitely be our guy. I don't believe that at all. I don't see how that could actually be true. But what I do see here is if that's the case, and they actually do think that, then they may be okay with, whatever quarterback's available, whether it's Tua or Herbert, at that spot, we will roll with and we will take it. Now, if they had their choice, would they ultimately try to grab Tua? I would have to say that would be my decision if I had the choice between those two. But
you also just mentioned the fact that they're desperate essentially for getting butts in the seats.
Yeah.
And Herbert being a West Coast guy, do they try to push for him because they think there's going to be more interest from their fan base?
And how much does Herbert remind them of a younger Phillip Rivers in a way? I mean, there's a lot of skill set there where, I mean, the arm talent is fantastic for Justin Herbert. It really is. He's good enough to get it done. Now, is he as good as Tua? I don't know. I think Tua is ultimately the better quarterback and can do more with the football. But again, Justin Herbert might be the guy that you could ultimately take a chance on. And maybe the West Coast ties bring more fans. I think either way, if it were Tua or if it were Justin Herbert, you're going to get a possibility at selling out a new stadium.
Yeah, but I feel like with Tua coming off of the injury and whatnot, like if you were taking Tua after he had just won a national championship, then I think you can play that. Hey, we're bringing in the a defending championship quarterback. Where I think right now, because he's coming off of injury, if I'm a Chargers fan and I'm looking for something to become a fan about, I would probably lean towards more because he's a West Coast guy rather than a guy coming off of injury.
Right. You have to look at also here that, I mean, what Tua did, though, when given the opportunity was amazing at the largest stage in college football, too. So you have to compare that as well. Hey, we're ultimately looking at winning a division here. We're ultimately trying to get past Kansas City and maybe even Denver this season. If we can do that, then we have a chance that with an extra playoff spot to maybe find our way in the playoffs. Because this, again, if I'm an LA Chargers fan saying, look, our team is really too good to be not having successful seasons anymore. And with Tyrod Taylor, do they fall middle of the pack in the AFC West? I don't see how they don't. Because I'm not saying Tyrod Taylor is this awful quarterback. Whoever they draft, if they get Tua or if they get Justin Herbert, there's still going to be a quarterback battle, I believe, in the offseason between Tyrod Taylor and said quarterback.
Yeah.
So you could very well see a Patrick Mahomes, Alex Smith type situation.
As much as I'm not a fan of Carr in Las Vegas, I would still take him over Tyrod Taylor.
Yeah, I think I'm kind of right there with you. I don't know how much Tyrod Taylor really has in the tank anymore. And especially, I mean, he runs with the ball a lot. Can he do that anymore in the AFC West? Is that something that he still has the ability to do? Not even necessary, really, in the LA Chargers offense with a guy like Austin Eckler. It's really going to be a toss-up. But if LA whiffs right here, because, for instance, I saw earlier on the CBS Sports mock draft that they were still sitting on having Isaiah Simmons go to L.A., the outside linebacker from Clemson. Now, if that were the case, I think that they mess up right there. If you don't take a quarterback at number 6, to me, L.A. is not really trying hard enough to, again, we're looking at big picture here. How far could L.A. ultimately go with the right quarterback in that offensive system? I think a long ways, and they could actually be maybe an actual threat to Kansas City in that division.
Yeah, I think if you're going linebacker, it's because you've already booted on this season and are looking at the quarterback class for next year.
That would only be the explanation I would give on that as well. When we come back, Tom Dorado is going to join us. We'll be talking some college football, and we'll get back into the draft later on before the show ends as well, and talk about where former Poke A.J. Green will end up, because we know he's going to get drafted at some point as well. That's next on the Afternoon Sports Drive here on the Triple Play Sports Radio Network.
Sunshine beating on the good times, moonlight raising from the grave, string band playing more of that honky tonks, pretty young thing going dancing in the rain.
It's the Afternoon Sports Drive, hour number 2 on Triple Play Sports Radio Network. A lot of NFL draft talk going on. We are about 3 hours, just under 3 hours away from the NFL draft. If you have any draft questions or tell us what's on your mind, call in at 533-1051, 533-1020. Patrick Wheeler with you, Tom Dorado in with us now as well. And, of course, Jason Elmquist will be happy to answer any of your questions. And Tom and I were just having the little off-air discussion about college football versus the NFL, and take what you want there. And you know, the good news about it is, hey, we can say that there's a little bit of sports action back. Now, we're not talking about anybody playing out on a field or any type of football being thrown around, but right, it's football. We get to finally talk a little bit of actual sports here.
Sure, you'll have a result to talk about.
Yeah,
kind of in quotes.
That's right.
I didn't watch the draft before the virus, so I'm sure as hell not going to watch it tonight. But I'll read the who won, who lost.
Well, you might
analysis and
you might want to watch it just to see.
I want to see, Green.
Well, you want, AJ Green, and then you also might want to see how many times the connection cuts out on somebody's.
Well, I'm sure somebody will document that immediately, either social media or a good enterprising reporter. But I will. I mean, I won't watch it, but I have to admit I will watch. I will read the. And somebody always comes out with which teams won, which teams lost.
Yeah,
they'll make that analysis, and I'll look at that, and I'll assume the Giants will be in the loser category, which they always are anyway.
I mean, yeah, and then it's kind of interesting you bring them up because they're sitting at the 4 spot, I believe.
They better get an offensive line.
So, well,
that's what they need.
Yeah, that's what. But again, that kind of brings up the idea of they're sitting there with the possibility of having a chance at quarterbacks early on. Is Daniel Jones truly the answer for New York?
Yeah, I think that when they jettisoned Manning and said, no more, you're not playing here anymore.
And then brought him back.
But the second time, I should qualify. The second time, they kind of set the bed, right? I mean, this is the bed they're going to lay in. And Daniel Jones, now, could they get another guy in terms of a backup? Yeah, they probably could. But for the last 3, 4, 5 years, the Giants have been in dire need of offensive linemen. Hey, Manning is, much as I bagged on him, Jason, it's hard to throw the damn ball when you're on your back. I don't care who you are.
Yeah, well, and I think I think they're in a good position because of, again, the two teams right behind them, both are jockeying for quarterbacks, we assume. You've got some quarterbacks there that, and maybe even there's someone even behind them that is interested in Tua or Herbert from Oregon. So I wouldn't be surprised if I'm Gettleman. I want to trade out of that. I want to move down 2 or 3 spots where I'm still going to likely get an offensive lineman, but I also get an extra pick in the process.
Having Gettleman in the draft is like
Gettleman's on the. I would tell you, Gettleman, at least from the local perspective, is on the hot seat.
Oh man, he's been there.
Because he came in and basically has talked a great game and not yet played one. And in New York, we go back to the media thing again. We talked about how soft the media is in the Midwest. They're not soft in New York. And, they've been through, 2 or 3 of these. We're going to have a good season, and then by the time they win their first game, they're 1-7. That doesn't fly in New York City, either with the Jets or the Giants.
And
Giants take a lot of heat,
They
too.
fall into another category of wasting a fantastic running back. Saquon Barkley still has it.
But if he has nobody to block,
I know, that's what I'm saying.
That's why all this other glitz stuff. Go get yourself about 3 or 4 good linemen. I don't know how many picks they got, but whatever they can get out of the draft this year, if they don't get a skill guy, just go get yourself a couple of linemen that you can count on to open up holes for Saquon Barkley, to protect Daniel Jones, who is also a runner, too. He can run and throw. But you've got nothing going on if you can't protect. And again, I fell for Eli, but he had no protection in the last 2 years.
No.
Well, and that's why I think Gettleman should be on the phone with the LA Chargers right now, and all the way up until their draft, until they actually pick, basically saying, hey, switch with us, and we'll take a 2nd or 3rd round pick off your hand as well, because then you get an extra pick, but you're guaranteed to still get that offensive lineman that you would get at 4 if you just move down to 6, because the Dolphins are going to take a quarterback as well, in my mind. So if he stays pat and picks an offensive lineman there, I think he's going to come off looking like an idiot, because the next 2 guys are going to take quarterbacks.
And isn't it interesting to think about what could happen too if he sits there and takes an offensive lineman, and let's say that either Justin Herbert or Tua just have a fantastic career, okay, or even start their career, and you're like, there the Giants were again, sitting there, but here we're stuck with Daniel Jones, and we're finishing 3rd in our division.
Well, hell, they didn't even get Eli Manning the first time. He refused to go to San Diego.
True. Yeah.
And then he ended up back in New York. And the thing that the Giants have to, I don't say they have to worry about, but you can't put your head in the sand either. Whatever they do, they're going to be measured by what the Jets do, because they're right there in town. And whether you think that's fair or not, it may not be, but it's reality. And if the Jets would come off looking bigger and better at the end of this draft, and Gettleman just didn't do anything, he'll get roasted pretty hard. And they're just waiting to get on him to begin with, I can tell you for sure. So he better come up with something good here in the next 2 days.
And he'll get roasted no matter what happens.
Well, he'll get roasted less if he brings in some offensive
The severity will go down a little bit. Okay, yeah, I see what you're saying. Some interesting news out of some more colleges. It seems
I was going to ask you, before we get into it, maybe you're going into this, maybe you and
maybe so, we'll see.
It. Did the Missouri announcement gain any traction?
Well, see, that's kind of what. Yeah, we're going to throw that in here. They announced, and you and I talked about it briefly yesterday at the end of the show, that Mizzou had said, "Hey, we're planning on having students come to in-person classes in the fall," and we announced that. And I thought when I heard that news, I was waiting for an ESPN notification or a Bleacher Report notification or whatever have you, and big news about it. But yeah, I didn't see a lot of traction gained on that. And also, when I think you throw it in here too, because Arizona, their president made some comments about football, but also said they're going to have students back in the fall. They plan on it. Okay. There's been a number of other schools that have kind of come along this line, said we plan on having students in school in the fall.
State.
Yeah, Washington State.
Washington State's president just this afternoon did as well. Yeah.
Well, that's a precursor, I think, to we're going to have football.
Well, that's what I said too. I don't know if that also means that, why it's not getting enough traction. Is it because, oh my gosh, it's a positive news story? We can't put that out. I mean, really, where does that fall? Like, why am I not getting notifications about all this stuff? About
it's a lot easier to write about bad stuff.
Yeah, you're right.
Oh, I think part of it is the fact that most of them have used the likely. It hasn't been a confirmed thing, but also the fact that all they're talking about is the education part.
Yeah, they're not talking about football.
They talk about if they specifically talk about football, like UConn president did, then it becomes national news.
But I think we all agree, if you want to believe, and this is where this whole scenario just goes crazy every day, because it depends on who's saying something, what they're saying, and who you trust as to what they're saying, both medically and football-wise. But if you believe the overall ground rule set out by the Power Fives, you're not going to have football unless you have kids back on campus. So to me, that would be the first hurdle. If you got kids back on campus at these places, then you have a chance perhaps of having football.
Yeah,
because that should be the biggest, I guess, worry or concern about seeing these universities already saying we're going to have on-campus learning. Well, when you start getting the other side where people say, yeah, we're going to go off-campus distance learning still, when you have two different groups, then that's when your college sports definitely take a hit, because now it's not, because like you guys said, it's kind of like with Bowlesby was saying, if everyone's doing the same thing, then maybe we can talk about sports. But if some people are going off-campus, some people are going on-campus, then it's not a coherent unit then.
And that ultimately, again, comes down to the whole regional argument.
Sure.
I mean, if we can get it done in Columbia, Missouri, and have students back on campus because we've been able to reopen Missouri, for instance, then, do you say, well, no, we better do what everyone else is still doing on, for instance, the coasts, and not have kids in campus and go on distance learning just because they are?
Well, they would certainly be regulated initially by the SEC. I mean, Missouri would be. So Missouri can say we're having people back on campus, but most of the SEC schools don't. Then football kind of falls by the wayside.
Well, and again, if Missouri says that, and a bunch of the SEC schools that are located right south in kind of the Midwest area, then let's say they have the better chance probably of having kids back on campus, I would say, just based on climate and everything else in the states that's going on with the coronavirus. Again, that kind of brings up the idea of, well, if the Big 12 and SEC say, we're good, we're going to bring everybody back, and then you've got the Pac-12 and then everyone else in the ACC that says, well, we just can't right now. Then what do you do with it in that situation?
I mean, obviously, if you only had two conferences, just using that as
two of the biggest
example.
Conferences, too.
But if you had, it goes back to the very root of the argument. I mean, if you're going to get TV money in the Big 12, then you don't care because you're not playing any Pac-12 schools. You really don't care. You might get more eyes on you if you're playing versus Arizona State not playing. Just using that as
right. So they would find a way to say, look, we're able to play right now. We're going to do it. We don't care what anyone else does.
And the TV people will jump all over the first opportunity they get and be jumping up and down for joy. And this is really facetious here. But let's say the Big 12 is the only conference playing in the whole country. They're the only conference going to play. ESPN and all the TV people would jump on it. Now, would there be as much money sent the Big 12's way? I don't know. That's probably debatable.
Compared to the SEC, no.
However, that's better than no money coming your way.
That's true.
Well, if they're the only product, I would assume there'd be a greater demand, and thus supply and demand means they should get more money.
Yeah, I mean, if they were the only product, they could probably ask for that, and again, demand a higher price on those TV contracts and everything else. Would they get it? I mean, probably, especially if there's nothing else going on.
In relation to the advertising that would be coming in to the various outlets like ESPN and ABC, and if they are buying nationally, some of these guys, just having it on in the Big 12 region might not get the job done because they want to be seen in LA. Well, if there's nothing in the Pac-12, then that might reduce some of that. But anyway, the money would still be there in some form or fashion. That's what we're talking about.
But hey, would TCU playing Texas Tech, I think it would draw viewers in LA? Because I bet it would if it was the only thing on.
I don't know about that matchup, but
I'm throwing you a random Big 12 matchup.
I mean, there'd be some other matchups.
Yeah.
Even Elmquist's dog doesn't believe that matchup.
He said, "What are you talking about on that matchup?"
Now, an Oklahoma State Bedlam might draw some national eyes. Certainly Oklahoma, Texas would draw some national eyes. TCU and Texas Tech, I don't know. You have a hard time drawing a lot of eyes in the Big 12 region, much less nationally.
Again, that was just one of the more random ones I could think of off the top of my head. But I'm kind of just saying, hey, if that's the only football going on, and people in LA going, hey, college football, I'm watching.
I got to feel like if the Big 12 is playing, the SEC is playing.
I am 100% in agreement with that. We got to take a break. When we come back, Arizona president is saying one thing, and the AD of Syracuse and the ACC is saying a completely opposite thing.
And of course, the guy from UConn has said everything completely different.
Everything the UConn guy says is just wrong. So to get to all that, that's next on the Afternoon Sports Drive on the Triple Play Sports Radio Network.
But if you had this life, you'd understand. Everything's a lot of up and down. but I ain't gonna let it get me down. Nah, nah, nah.
Afternoon Sports Drive, Triple Play Sports Radio Network. Patrick Wheeler and Tom Dorado here in the studio. Jason Elmquist joining us remotely as before we get to our college football stuff. Jason, you got some news for us on Oklahoma State golf?
Just released from Oklahoma State that Austin Eckroat has been named All-American. Obviously, that's we've seen a lot of that. Over the weekend, they had the wrestlers. A bunch of wrestlers were named All-Americans because you don't have the traditional way of announcing them based on postseason performance. So, for the third time in his career, Austin Eckroat has been named an All-American with the announcement of the NCAA Division I Ping All-American teams today, which was voted on by the Golf Coaches Association of America. He was one of 11 players named to a second team. So he was a second-team selection, obviously Edmond native. So, again, three-time All-American, pretty impressive for Eckroat. And again, obviously two pretty big influencing years as freshman and sophomore year. Obviously, freshman year they ended up winning the national championship here in Stillwater.
What was your take on the naming of All-Americans in wrestling? I mean, obviously, this is, to my knowledge, maybe it's done way back when, but I don't recall it ever being done this way where you had to earn it on the mat. Obviously, they didn't have a chance to do that. But what was your take on that, and were you surprised?
I was curious how they were going to do it, because again, in the past, it's always been solely based on your performance at the NCAA tournament. It wasn't necessarily a yearly cumulative award. It was if you finished top 8 in your weight, you were an All-American. That was it. Mm-hmm. This by doing it this way, because there was no NCAA tournament, it was more based on what you did for the entire season. So maybe, I'm going to be curious if maybe that's something they consider doing going forward. Maybe even having like a second and third team All-Americans based on how, if you didn't finish top 8 at NCAAs, we look at your, how your entire season went, and then we name second and third teamers or something like that. But because that's the thing, is because I was actually wondering that when it all got canceled, because every year Oklahoma State Wrestling on their media guide, they put returning All-Americans on their cover, and I was like, well, we don't know who any of the All-Americans were from this year, especially a handful of freshmen or first-year starters. But I think it was smart. You still recognize those guys who had great seasons and just didn't get the opportunity to finish off with the NCAA tournament and get your definitive top 8 in each weight class. Because ultimately they did. I think it was a first team, second team, and honorable mention for each weight, because like Nick Piccinini obviously was a first team All-American, so I'm guessing it was kind of based off of like the top 8 ranked guys, kind of based on the coaches. I think it was the Coaches Association that did the thing. So I like it. I think since you couldn't award championships to guys, especially since a large portion of those guys were probably seniors, you at least give them the distinction of having been All-American in their final season.
Yeah, I was a little bit surprised, and you just answered the question, because I was going to say who actually came up with this, but this was a coach's selection, right? So that verifies if anybody. I'm sure there's somebody out there who wishes they were, was number 9. They wish they were number 8 or 7, but such is life, I guess. But the one other thing I was going to get into with you too, Jason, because you're on top of the local scene a lot, obviously, high school stuff, area stuff. We've talked about that a lot on various shows that you and I have done. And I thought I saw, hopefully I read it correctly, over in Tulsa, the athletic director of Tulsa Public Schools they're going along under the impression that we're starting with the previews, I think, in one of those, in middle of August, whatever the heck they have those preview things over in Tulsa. But they're operating under the impression that we're going forward and there's not going to be any delays. Does that surprise you any on a high school level?
A little bit, because I think to me it's more difficult at the high school level because you don't have as easy of access to team physicians, team doctors to maybe be able to pick up on some of these things when it comes to the coronavirus and whatnot. So, and then again, you also don't have the money and means as easily accessible as these college programs as well. So it does kind of surprise me. I figured the biggest impacted would be the high school level but that's at the same time, we're obviously the governor of Oklahoma has said that, that he's opened up sporting venues, which I'm assuming would allow the potential for, I don't know if the OSSAA would consider doing something like, because usually after all the sports seasons are done, you get about a 2-week window to be able to do spring football in the middle of May at the high school level. If they're doing, if they're still doing distance learning, if OSA considers allowing that, since the governor has opened up sporting venues again.
I think there'll probably be there'll probably be some decisions on the go that you have to make probably. Yeah. But I read that this morning. Gil Cloud's the guy who's the athletic director of Tulsa Public Schools. Now, to be fair to Gil, he did say we do have 3 options on the table, and just like any AD on a college level, well, we start on time, and we start a delay, and then we have to really delay it to another 4 or 5 months. So he did say that there were other options, but he made it sound like they're under the impression that, at least from what they know, they're going full steam ahead and going to open on time.
I almost feel like it's a case where a lot of the whether it's university presidents or these high school ADs are basing it off of kind of what they're hearing from their state government. Obviously, again, Oklahoma is going to be able to start opening a slow rollout of opening up things, but they're not being definitive. They're not coming out and saying, hey, they're not setting a date kind of like Gundy did. They're they still have a contingency, because that's the other thing is we don't know what type of spike that might happen once businesses start reopening across these states. So I think that's why you be optimistic, but understand that if the virus hasn't, just because it's summer and weirdly enough the virus doesn't subside, then you haven't committed yourself and paid yourself into a corner by saying, yeah, we're going to be back no matter what.
One thing around here that I'll be interested in, and I think I have it correctly, I want to say it's about 2 or 3 weeks that the public access to campus buildings will be lifted. They shut that off where you had no public access at all to any of the buildings on campus. And I think, and somebody might call me up and tell me I'm wrong on this, but I think I read where it was going to be like in mid-May, maybe early May, that was going to be lifted. Now, when you can start bringing people back to the public, the public back to the buildings, if you will, in the summertime, doesn't have a lot of just traffic in and out of buildings. However, there are people who need to be in the buildings. They don't have to be doing the Zoom thing. I wonder if that's going to come off as scheduled. Because to me, this is going to be a gradual, let's get back on campus, let's get back into a building, let's get back into a classroom, let's get back on a football field, let's get back on a basketball court. I think it's going to come in a state. You call it roll it through. But each time we turn around, something else is added to it. That's got to be a positive, isn't it?
Right. Well, because we have to keep in mind, though, like at Oklahoma State, they've already announced, a lot of the summer stuff up until July 1 has already been canceled or potentially postponed. Like because obviously, the June is big for camps, for sporting camps up on Oklahoma State. I know football has not, it's basically kind of like a postponed is what I think they say on most of their camp websites. But again, I don't know if some of them because I know some of them have like a camp in mid-June and then one in mid-July. If they've canceled the one in June and just holding out for hope for July, or if they're going to be able to move that one in June to add it to the end of the one in July. But that's going to be the interesting thing is we know for certain, at least up at OSU, that things are canceled up until July 1. but they've at least given them the opportunity to possibly roll things back out starting July 1.
We all know, if you've been around enough and having worked in that building for a better part of 30 years, summertime is just chock full of kids. I mean, especially when John Smith has his wrestling camp, basketball, men and women have their camps. And that's a form of
when you have grandparent U.
Yeah, that's a form of
thing as well.
Yeah, that's a form of recruiting when they bring in everybody, but there's a certain amount of team. When they have team camps, these teams have kids that they're aiming at to recruit, and especially I'm talking basketball wise. So that kind of throws a different wrinkle in there as well. But I'll be interested again if by the time July 1 rolls around and we have a semi all clear, then maybe July will be the camp month. Maybe we'll get these people back on campus that way. Maybe.
Yeah, my assumption is that, because again, I at least know, last I checked, I think it was last week or week and a half ago, for OSU football, like their elite camps, because obviously that's, as I've mentioned on the show before, a lot of your best walk-ons have come, or some of your targets for recruiting they've started because you brought them on campus for these camps. I mean, you want to, if you're Gundy, again, if you just no matter what he says, he wants those camps to be held because it's going to be important for recruiting, and the possibility of having that happen obviously is there since they didn't say things are canceled through August 1, and I'm assuming that's probably why the universities put the target date as July 1 and not saying all summer events are canceled. They just said up until then, and then obviously the classes are online up and through I think essentially up until the fall semester, which we don't know yet what the plan is for that.
Yeah, the further it's pushed back, the more room you have to make a decision, which is what we've come to decide there on all that.
Patrick and I were talking about this, and I've read where various sports say, well, we need X amount of time to get ready for the season, whether it's MLB, NBA, now we're talking college football. I can't imagine, and I'm just throwing this out as a date, but let's just say everybody here at Oklahoma State was given the green light to report on August 1. And we're talking football now, but every other sport too. You can report on August 1. Now, that might crowd Colin a little bit on the soccer front, but they don't have much training pre-camp anyway, so I don't know if that would hurt them any. But I can't believe that a football team could not get ready in a month.
I don't buy that they couldn't get ready in a month.
What would it take? I understand part of the month would be school. You wouldn't be able to practice all day long, but they don't do that anyway.
And if they said you have a month to get ready, wouldn't most college football teams say, fine, we'll do it?
These are kids to get 1 week, get them running up and down the field and see who really did anything, and then from then on start running plays. You ought to be ready to go in a month.
I've heard from both Gundy and Lincoln Riley kind of being asked that potential scenario, and obviously Gundy says that's their job. We have to get them prepared within a month. We'll get them prepared in a month. Lincoln Riley, he admitted, he was like, the product probably won't be as good. He's like, but we as coaches are going to be the only ones who notice it. The fans won't necessarily see it as a product looking not as good as previously, where the coaches, obviously, where they see these guys day in and day out, might be able to see a dip in productivity. So, yeah, from all the coaches I've heard, I haven't heard anything from like a Mac Brown and stuff like that, but most of the Big 12 coaches I've heard, it's if we're told that we have a month to prepare, we can make do.
And that's what I told Tom over the break, is it may take a little longer than usual to shake off some of the rust, but everyone will still be on that even playing field. It's not like some teams had an earlier start, so you have to take that.
My biggest concern with that 1 month isn't necessarily learning the X's and O's. It's the physicality. Because again, they will not have been with Rob Glass, for Oklahoma State specifically. At least we know until I believe until at least the end of May. So even if you get them back into place by July 1, when they're used to having an entire off season of working out with him, what potential injuries could evolve, and if those guys are in shape in that regard.
And how quickly do you get to pads and hitting?
And everybody, you've had the preseason has the 2-a-days, quote unquote 2. They're not 2 days anymore.
Right. Not like they used to be. Yeah.
Back in the day, we had 2-a-days, and the 2-a-days were about 4 hours in the morning. You come right back at 5 o'clock at night and practice till 9. I mean, those were 2-a-days, real 2-a-days. Now they're timed, and some of the days you don't even hit. I mean, you just run around in shorts and t-shirt. So you got a whole different approach in preseason workouts now than you used to have back in the day. But I was telling Patrick, back in the day, and not too far back in the day, where we didn't have this summertime regimen. The kids either went to school or, they just hung around here and worked out all summer. We sent them home, and they went back to work at their home. They went back to work on the farm, or they went back and sat around on the couch all summer and didn't do anything. But when we had them back up here the very first day at the old track, they would report. And they had times to run, and you found out who was doing nothing and who was doing something.
And that's actually something that Gundy brought up during his teleconference. The fact that, back in his day, he'd go back during the summer and go work for his dad, and then then you'd report at the beginning of August and stuff like that. But I think we also have to keep in mind, we'd be kidding ourselves if we said that the athletes that go out on the field now, physically and everything that they've done to prepare themselves, is anywhere close to what it was back in the 80s, when you didn't necessarily have the specific diet training and this, that, and the other that they're so strenuous on now. That wasn't a thing back then.
Well, you'd have to look around a little bit, and I think there are kids in every age in every sport that transcend what they did 20 years ago and what they're doing now. Malcolm Rodriguez could have played with that group back in '85 if he obviously wasn't born. But the fact is, his workout regimen is enough that he would be in shape. Brock Martin, probably. You saw a couple of those videos of him. There are guys that spread out all over the place in every school that are taking this seriously.
Yep.
But there are some kids, I promise you, when they get back to wherever the campus is, that first workout, the coach is going to find out, did you eat a little bit too much mom's cooking for the last couple of months? Or did you go out and actually work when nobody was forcing you to do it? And it's pretty obvious who did and who didn't when they get here.
And you'll be able to separate those. I mean, the ones that are truly working to be elite, are working hard to be a step above competition, have not taken a day off since all this started.
Well, you wouldn't think so. You would hope.
I really don't. I think that's the case. They've found ways to get it done, and whatever that is, we may not know, but if you can see it when they come back, then that's the case.
You got roads to run, you got hills to run.
It's going to be obviously a little more difficult with.
But if you're playing video
resources,
games 24 hours a day, you're not running.
Now, if you can mix in the video games with the running, then maybe.
Yeah.
But yeah.
Speaking of, real quick before we take a break, just saw this come across Twitter. Pete Thamel with Yahoo Sports actually just tweeted out about 15 minutes ago. Sources have told him the NCAA football oversight committee met today. They discussed optimal times needed for conditioning when the sport returns. Also, a lot of conversation on a way to, quote, create an equitable start to the year based on variance in schools returning at different times.
There you go. So
the conversation has already started on that,
which is important. I think and again, you're seeing the result of that being all like, for instance, places reopening. All this is trending in a positive way, and sports are a result of this. Okay, that's what I think people need to realize. That's why we're getting schools that are saying we plan on having these students back. Why? Because this is why we have had 18 straight days of lower daily cases. This is a stat right here I got to throw out to you guys that will probably blow your mind, because this data just came out of New York today, I believe. 21.5% of New Yorkers already had coronavirus antibodies in their system. 16% in Long Island alone. It's almost 2 million people that have already had the coronavirus, and a lot of them didn't even know.
It was specifically about 2.7 million projected already had.
Yeah, isn't that unbelievable? And then they added same studies have been done in Boston, and then the USC study as well. So this is nationwide where a lot of this has happened, which kind of tells us we still don't know the exact death rate, but we do know it's well under 1%. It's unbelievable when you look at these numbers, because, and too, in Massachusetts, they've also found out that 97% of the deaths that happened there were people that were over 81 years old and people that had underlying health conditions.
There are a lot of things that happen in an area like New York, Boston, And for people who live out here, thank your stars, you don't have that population density to deal with.
Yeah.
And you have room, you have space, you have natural distancing anyway, for the most part. But when you're crammed into a subway car 6 times a night or 5 times a week, and there's no room but for you and to hang on that strap, and you have to go 20 minutes in there in that subway car with people you don't know whether they're sick or not, there's no doubt that people would probably have had this and not known it or been able to fight it off. But you're not dealing with the same animal. That's why New York, the high-density areas are much different than here in the Midwest, where you don't have as much going on.
But at the same time, I think that was why it was important for a place like Stillwater to for the university to go to distance learning, because of the fact that you basically cut the population in half by sending everyone home, thus preventing that being a possibility in a small town like Stillwater. And I think the biggest thing, and again, I think the biggest thing we need to remember, it's not necessarily about obviously the lives being lost is the important thing, but the reason we did the social distancing is that way places like Stillwater Medical Center weren't getting overrun to the point where not just people who with coronavirus that were dying, but other people with other diseases, because they weren't able to, control and use the proper PPE that obviously they were running short of instantly almost. That's the big thing that was about the social distancing, was just helping kind of alleviate and protect those frontline people.
Well, yeah, the goal was to get out in front of it as much as possible. It's just interesting to see a number that big, for instance, in New York, that they didn't even have a chance to get out in front of it because they didn't know about it.
I think you're going to see these kinds of numbers as we go down the line, and you're going to, wow, you didn't even know that. But we didn't even know this thing was around,
exactly.
quite frankly, until it really hit hard. And Stillwater, again, is but I'm of the ilk, and I'm not pushing to go early. I'm glad, again, I say this every show, I'm glad I'm not making this decision, because it's going to be a tough one. But whether we jump in the deep end today, or we wait till Christmas Day, it's going to be awkward no matter when it is, right? I mean, we're never going to have a great time where we go, oh, man, this is the time. I feel everything positive about it. So there'll be some reservations no matter when you do it. So why not go ahead and do it and see what happens?
Well, and the one thing, Tom, that it dawned on me earlier this week that maybe would help, especially the OSU football fan base, to realize, keep this in mind. If you bring everything back and you try to get back to normal, and you do get another surge, and suddenly Stillwater Medical is inundated, and they can't get anybody but coronavirus people in there, but you still had a football season. Well, last year, Kylan Wallace and Spencer Sanders went down with injuries. Well, they're not going to be able to go to Stillwater Medical Center or any hospital in the area to get those things fixed, because it's not a life-threatening disease or something like that. So that we got to keep that in mind, is if we inundate these hospitals, a casual thing like a torn ligament or something like that gets put on the back burner until things get back to normal again, and that injury possibly was lingered and got even worse. So that's the thing, is we got to keep an understanding that they're trying to prevent the possibility of more chaos, because we're not able to properly take care of everyone outside of just the people with coronavirus. Well, if the Stillwater Center gets inundated.
From what I understand, they've had a pretty light run, I think, throughout all this, they being Stillwater Medical Center.
But they were also ahead, Stillwater was one of the few in Oklahoma that was ahead of everyone else of making sure that, shutting down the town. Obviously, OSU announcing before spring break, don't even come back, stuff like that. They were proactive, and I think that's what helped Stillwater Medical in the long run.
It did help them in some of the surgeries are going to be opening back up to be available. Elective surgeries,
a couple of weeks, and probably see how it goes.
My prediction is by the time college football rolls around, that they will have room, if needed, to address an injury or something like that.
I think if I'm an AD,
but that's what I'm saying. If we get another wave and it's worse, like some people are saying, those injuries then are not going to be able to get taken care of.
Well, if we have a wave like they're saying, and it's a big if, because if you could listen on Monday and one tells you that, and on Tuesday somebody else tells you different, and they don't really know. Right. But just from a continuity viewpoint, if you start the football season on time, which again, as each day goes by, I see less and less reason not to.
Exactly.
But if you play 2 or 3 games and then you have a spike, then you're going to cut the season short at 2 or 3 games, and then all of a sudden you have nothing. You kind of like the basketball thing in the basketball tournament. So AD's have got a lot to consider, but they're working in concert with mayors and they're working in concert with governors and certainly presidents of universities. They'll have it figured out by the time it has to be figured out.
And that's why I think it's almost kind of important that you're seeing states like Oklahoma, like Georgia, Tennessee talking about trying to reopen, because it's almost like a test run of, okay, did we have a spike when we reopened things? We didn't? Okay, maybe we're safe to move forward back to normalcy with athletics and universities come the fall, where if you get out there, you reopen it, and suddenly you do get a spike, then your presidents can say, okay, we just need to say now that we're shutting down for fall.
That's why I said you're going to have to eventually put your foot in the water.
Yep.
And whether it's today or 5 months from now, you're never going to feel comfortable. And let's hope that it's not behind us, but let's hope it's down where it's not a big factor.
There's risk in everything you do, and this is not going to be any different.
So I applaud those who have at least are considering loosening up the restrictions.
Yeah.
Especially those who are being just pummeled economic. We haven't even talked about that.
No.
Economically, that's another subject.
Yeah. When we come back, one Oklahoma State football player will be selected in the draft. We'll talk about where A.J. Green will end up. That's next on the Afternoon Sports Drive here on the Triple Play Sports Radio Network.
You know I love you to death, even if both break down tonight. And you say you hate me, and we go to bed angry. I know everything will be alright. I'll be here waiting. I promise I'm changing. I just need time.
Wrapping up the Afternoon Sports Drive on the Triple Play Sports Radio Network. Talk about one Oklahoma State Cowboy who is projected to be picked in this 2020 draft coming up in T-minus 2 hours. It is on our doorstep. The NFL draft is back. A.J. Green.
He'll have to wait a while.
It's interesting to see kind of where he's been thrown around. Sporting News has him in the 5th round to the Dolphins, The Athletic 5th round to the Packers, CBS Sports 6th round to the Giants, and NFL.com 6th round to the Packers. I told you.
How are they broken up? At 5th and 6th last day, or what? What is it? How's that broken up?
4 through 7 last day.
Okay. Yeah, so it's 7 total rounds. So you throw he's going to be on that day, and I said it to you over the break. This is the wrong draft, unfortunately, to be a defensive back. It is so deep in that category, in that position. But
I think Jason would echo this because he's had as many opportunities as most.
Yeah,
he's just a good kid, and you want to see good things happen to a good kid. He's talented, no question. He was the anchor of that secondary for a good many of his years that he was here. He was very effective, so much so teams didn't throw his way, just stayed away from him. So you'd like to see something good happen for him. But I don't know, and I don't know enough from the X and O viewpoint what the competition is and what teams are looking for. But as they say, only one team has to like you. And they do, then they pick you.
Well, Jason, they like his size and his length, but the speed is kind of where he's been knocked.
Yeah, the NFL.com analyst, Lance Zierlein, that I saw, his draft bio for Green said he plays with adequate athleticism and route anticipation, but has issues sticking with quick route breaks and longer routes where he will fall behind against NFL speed.
How'd you like to be a defensive back in today's NFL?
Especially since you can't do anything.
If
you look at them wrong, they throw a flag. So
against you.
I will say one thing that could help him, though, because I was looking, because I typed up a story, and one of the things I pointed out, because a lot of the teams that they had drafting him, and funny enough, the ones that I looked up, everyone that I looked up, and it sounds like almost all but one that you looked up, had him going to NFC.
Yeah.
And what I found interesting is a lot of the franchises right now that they have projected to pick him do not have tall cornerbacks. So maybe it's maybe they're going to go after an AJ Green to start working towards, because there was I think it was the Giants. I think only had like one guy over 6 foot or something like that. Tom?
The Giants and the two of the different outlets there I mentioned the Packers absolutely could use defensive back help. So he's going to find a team. I have no doubt about that.
The interesting one I saw was USA Today had him going with the 156th pick, which I believe would be 5th round, going to the 49ers. And the interesting with them is they are a team, if you go and look at their roster, all but 2 of their 8 roster spots for cornerbacks are taller than 6 foot, all of them are except for 2. So obviously he would fit into that mold of a tall cornerback that the 49ers look at, and obviously you'd be paired up with a guy like Richard Sherman, who obviously would be great to learn behind. So in my mind, that would be a great destination for an AJ Green, is going to a 49ers squad.
For the longest time here at Oklahoma State, pretty much under Miles, maybe a little bit under Early Gundy. We had corners that were under 6 feet, and while they were good players and they fought their tail off to high point a ball and go up there, the trend was 6'4", 6'5" receivers. And I'm not much of a mathematician, but it's a jump ball. 6'4", 5'9", generally speaking, you're going to have to be pretty talented to come down with the ball or knock it away at 5'9" versus a 6'4" guy. But as you've seen, Oklahoma State has added over the years height to the corner spot because you have to match it what you're getting in receivers.
It's becoming more of a almost necessity to have in defensive backs.
Jump balls, you can't have jump balls and lose them.
No.
Look at a team like Seattle, which obviously they won Super Bowl by getting some bigger cornerbacks, and that's exactly what they did when they selected Slim out of here from here in Oklahoma State.
Flowers?
Trey Flowers, because he was 6'3" or whatever. He was playing safety, and they converted him to cornerback, and he's been a starter for them since his rookie year. So I mean, they're definitely starting a trend. Obviously, if you have speed, it's even better. So that's why I think AJ Green, while he's not one of the bigger cornerbacks, still being at 6'1", I think is going to help him. A lot of people project him as a more likely a career backup. But being at 6'1", I think is going to help him because of the fact that most of the rosters that I looked at, no one was even close to 6 foot tall at the cornerback position at some of these places, and the ones who were over 6 foot were the ones who were leading their team in interceptions.
Well, one thing they're going to get with AJ is, other than what we just talked about, they're going to get somebody they don't have to worry about off the field. I mean, he's a good individual, good player. He'll bring that part to an organization, which I don't know. It's one of the things I don't like about the NFL, which it's one of the reasons I don't follow. But I mean, to me, character has to sometimes take over and maybe overplay, overall X's and O's. If you got a bad dude who's a good X's and O guy, well, I guess it's all about winning, but. You need good people on your team, and he'll be good people no matter who actually signs him. And I hope he does. I hope he gets what he wants because he gave us everything he could possibly give us here. He deserves one of these things.
Certainly.
And bottom line, he'll find a team, and also you have to, you feel bad. He just lost his dad very recently, too.
What a horrible situation.
So, how great would it be to see his name called and experience that moment for himself now and everything that's happened? It would be just, tremendous to continue the story for AJ. So his skill set is good enough to find him a spot in the NFL at some point. A team will have use for AJ Green.
Jason brought up Trey because Trey was, I think, one of our favorite players here. Don't you think, Jason?
Oh, yeah.
He was a guy that when you looked at him, you thought, where does he play? What can he? All he did was make plays. All he did was he was as skinny as a rail. But at the same time, he had such great jumping ability, such great anticipation, and he studied the heck out of film. And he's made himself into an NFL player right now. It's good to see him when he's out there.
And you spoke of character with AJ Green. Obviously, that was one thing that Trey had in spades as well.
That is correct, yes.
Well, we look forward to it. Less than 2 hours away. The NFL Draft takes place tonight. Again, you can watch it on 3 different spots: ESPN, ABC, NFL Network, starting at 7 o'clock. it will all take place, and we'll have plenty to discuss tomorrow. Jordan Bishop will be on with us, and we'll talk about that and plenty more. You've been listening to the Afternoon Sports Drive. Tom, appreciate your time.
Yes, sir.
As
Say
always.
hello to the Bish for me.
Yes, we will. Appreciate it, Jason. We'll see you back here tomorrow, and be interesting to see what you think about what the Chiefs end up doing with that 32 pick. So we'll
trade it.
You hopefully trade it. I hope they do something as well.
Jason
like
wants
that.
to trade everybody.
Yeah, I know. He wants to trade everybody. All
I'm
right.
gonna trade Tom for a better co-host.
Oh, ouch. Yeah.
Hey, you know that's not, you don't really believe that.
We got to get out of here before you guys start
I know he
squabbling
just
on
says
air.
that just because.
If anything, I'd trade up so I could take you first overall, Tom.
Oh, there you go. That's what he meant.
See how nice you turned that back around. Thank you.
This has been the Afternoon Sports Drive on the Triple Play Sports Radio Network. We'll be back here, same place, same time tomorrow. Doug Gottlieb is next.